2022 is already shaping up to be absolutely killer between Horizon Forbidden West, Triangle Strategy, Elden Ring just dropped, Kirby and the Forgotten Land is dropping, we've got Mario Strikers, there's just a ton of games, Fire Emblem 3 Hopes, we've still got Bayonetta 3, Splatoon 3, it just keeps coming and coming and coming. 2022 might be the best year of gaming that we've seen in quite some time, but I wanted to talk about two games. Now that Elden Ring has came out, you've seen so many of the perfect scores, you've seen the 10 out of 10s, you've seen the 97, one of the greatest rated games of all time, and it just begs the question for me, and something that I get quite a bit on my channel, is how can the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 live up to what's going on? And it's not so much of it living up to Elden Ring, more so than standing up to what Breath of the Wild already did. Now, when I talked about this topic on my live stream, I said, well, wait a minute. If you go back 5 years, let's look at all the open world games that came out 5 years. Are any of those games actually relevant when it comes to comparing to all-time greats? There's not a single one. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and to be honest, even if you extend it past that 2017, you have to go back to probably The Witcher 3 in 2015 for an open world game to get as much acclaim as we see in like the high 90s or low 90s to high 90s when it comes to an open world game. So the fact that The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is still being talked about to this day, is still being talked about in terms of innovation, still does plenty of things that you just don't see, that has me thinking that The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 not only is going to match what Elden Ring does when it comes to it, but even top it when it comes to multiple different things. Now, of course, they're very different games. Elden Ring, I've put about 3-4 hours of the time that I'm recording this video. I've taken down a couple bosses. I've played the game. It's fun. I think that it's a very good game, and it's proof, once again, like I talked about in my previous video, that graphics and frame rate aren't the be all end all with games. You can still love a game and it can be just as good as the greatest games of all time and have issues in those areas. And Elden Ring definitely has issues in those areas. And all of the big reviews that it got, most of them were not on the Xbox Series with VRR helping smooth out the frame rate. It was on the PlayStation 5, where things necessarily aren't the best on there as I've been playing it. So when I look at that and I say, Legend of Zelda is probably going to be a lot more optimized this time around. They don't have to worry about the Wii U. It's not going to be a Wii U game ported over and have any issues there from trying to get it out for launch. I think that this game is going to run extremely well, be really smooth and responsive, because as I'm playing through Elden Ring, I'm noticing that while it's running at a higher frame rate than, like, let's say Pokemon Legends Arceus or other 30 frames per second games, Astral Chain and all that, it doesn't quite feel as responsive as The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild or some of the other games that are clearly targeting a lower frame rate when it comes down to it. So when I look at this year in gaming, when I look at The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and what that game can do, even from the small snippets that I've seen so far, there is so much creativity, there is so much innovation, and then you still have that layered on top of everything else Breath of the Wild did. Being able to climb anywhere that you want, being able to essentially go anywhere that you want, being able to manipulate the environment to directly affect the gameplay in there. Have it to where you can cut down a blade of grass if you want to. If you want to chop down a tree and use it to cross over to the other side, you can. If you want to glide through the sky, you can. Heck, if you want to light things on fire, create a upward draft of air, then use that as a launching takeoff. You can do that on top of the other aspects of, hey, you have to survive in the extreme heat or survive in the real cold. I love those things, and it makes the world feel vibrant and open and up there. So I think that if you combine everything that I just talked about, that we know what Breath of the Wild already brings to the table, that still in this day, 2022, other open world games are still not doing that physics-based stuff in the open world to have more immersiveness in that world. We still don't see games where you can climb everywhere. We still don't see games to where you can manipulate the environment like you can in Breath of the Wild. The fact that Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 is going to have that going for it on top of all of the new elements, just the small stuff that we've seen in the reveal trailer for the game, or at least the second trailer. There was the first trailer that didn't show much, and then the second trailer that showed a bit more when it comes to what Link can do. I'm extremely confident that The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 can not only match its review score that it got back in 2017 with the original, but also maybe even top it if they really polish things out and add a few different things. Now, what are those things that they can add in order to get that? Well, I think that what they're going to have to do is obviously innovate more within the open world. So definitely getting rid of some of the annoying things that The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild had, like the rain and then being able to slip. We need some claws that we can put on our hands to where we can dig in like a Sneasler does in Pokemon Legends Arceus. But also, if you look at it, the little sky areas that they have, I think that they can innovate within there. They can add in some actual dungeon and puzzle gameplay, kind of more in depth from what they have with the original Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And they can also improve the combat when it comes to various different aspects. Some people would love to have a blacksmith, so if your weapon breaks, you can fix it. And then also maybe potentially putting in a few more skill-based stuff, kind of like the Master Swordsman skills that the Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess had. So there's definitely areas that they can improve when it comes to combat, when it comes to accessibility, when it comes to a variety of different things with the Legend of Zelda. So I'm not actually worried about that at all now that I've put 3+ hours into Elden Ring on my PlayStation 5. I think that these games, just in general, they all kind of complement each other, because while everyone can compare and contrast, and heck, we're doing that right now, at this point, they're so different. They're so different, and it adds just to the variety of different games. Now, I'll be completely honest, when it comes to Elden Ring, I don't see where the innovation lies to like a 97. Now, I still need to play a lot more, and I definitely need to beat more bosses and fight more and do different things, but I'm not quite seeing the 97 review score. Now, usually when I play a game, in the history of gaming, I've played all of the highest rated games. Like every single game that has the highest rated scores, if you go on Metacritic and look down, I've played all of them. And with a few exceptions, I can see very quickly why that game got that such high score. Like as soon as I start playing, I'm like, okay, that does something that I've never seen before. That does something that innovates the whole genre. And I think that's the biggest difference that I see, at least with me, with Elden Ring, and even with the original Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and even with Breath of the Wild 2. I think that Elden Ring is the type of game that innovates within the Souls subgenre. That whole subgenre of, hey, it's really hard, you die, you go back, you collect your souls, you collect whatever was lost. I think that it innovates within that by having a nice open world to where you can kind of go and fight, and it's different for that world. But is it different for the whole open world type of games? Nothing that I've seen just yet, and nothing that I've been able to see in reviews or anything like that. Everyone just says it's the best Souls game. It refines the Souls genre, but I'm not really seeing what they do with the open world game that really takes it to the next level, like we've seen with Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Now, I feel that Breath of the Wild 2, obviously we've seen a few different things in terms of movement options, being able to turn into liquid and kind of go through buildings at the top and like the sky areas, being able to fly through different sky areas, potentially with, I would say, some type of environmental hazards that are going on at that time. I mean, there's still more to see on that. And also, how is the Sheikah Slate imbued in your arm now, and how is that going to play a part into exactly how you traverse and how you go through different things? So there's still a lot to know, but from what I've just seen, it does seem like there is a lot more room to kind of layer and innovate on top of what they've already done, from what I'm seeing and from what I've read with Elden Ring. So I think that in that respect, it stacks up fairly nicely, because I don't think it's going to be able to compete with what people say when it comes to the combat options and what you can do, because Elden Ring just has a million different things. Obviously, the story is almost non-existent in Elden Ring from what I've seen. And to be honest, these games never really have that great of stories, in my opinion. They're very hands-off, and that's okay. It's more about the combat and the gameplay. And I think that Breath of the Wild kind of has that same thing going for it too, at least the first game. Although I think the second game is going to have a far more involved story, which also can be a reason why that it stacks up just good with the original Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and even could be a bit beyond it if they do have the story and the dungeons on top of everything that made the original game good and optimized to a T on the Nintendo Switch now that you have that engine going. There is a lot to look forward to with this, but I do feel that Breath of the Wild 2 can be right there with Elden Ring. Now, to leave off on this last thing between the comparisons and everything, it's tough, right? Because when you're looking at Elden Ring and the type of game that it is, and you see what the reviews have given it, and kind of you get into the game yourself, it's almost not noticeable at first, you know, because this is kind of a little bit of my impressions of the game. It's not noticeable. It's not something that reaches and jumps out to you unless you're the hardest of core of Soul fans. I think that Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and even Breath of the Wild 2, when that comes out, you'll be able to instantly see, even if you haven't played or don't like Zelda games before, it's a very different style of game that no other type of game is quite like, which I think you can say the same thing with Elden Ring as well, because it's the originators or one of the first to do that whole Souls type of gameplay and everything. Heck, they are when it comes to Demon Souls. So for me overall, while I think that Elden Ring is fantastic and I can see why it got what it got, I still feel, based off of what we know so far, and I think what we're going to see at E3, I think that The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 has a phenomenal opportunity to sweep us off our feet and to wow us like no game has ever done before, just because we're looking at some of the other bigger open world games which already dropped, right? Elden Ring, and then also with Horizon Forbidden West. Those are pretty much the two big open world games for this year outside of Breath of the Wild, of course, if it makes it this year, which I think that it will. We'll see at Nintendo's usual Nintendo Direct at E3 that game a bit more when it comes to Breath of the Wild 2, but I just feel that Breath of the Wild just has the opportunity, it has the chance based on the variety of things that I already stated here. And also, like I said, momentum from the first game. People are still talking about that first game. People are still mentioning it. Heck, I'm still seeing stuff in that game that I never knew that you can even do. I saw a guy run through with a like ice rod, and he would run through the fire parts inside one of the shrines, and I never knew that you can do that. He would throw the ice rod and then he would run right through with it, and it gives you that protection, which I didn't know. I didn't know at all. So I think that those are the type of things, that type of creativity with solving shrines, with getting through, with the open world, just interaction. That's what's going to make Breath of the Wild 2 shine even more than the original game. I really do feel that. And I think that it's going to hit a little bit in a different way than what you would say Elden Ring. But I think that at the end of the day, they're very different. I just don't feel, right now at this point, I don't feel that Elden Ring innovates within the open world more so than it innovates within the Souls subgenre. So I think that that's a good and a bad thing overall. But we'll see exactly how the review scores stack up when it comes to Breath of the Wild 2 and what that game does compared to Elden Ring, because that's like the big thing now, like what's going to win the game of the year, what's going to be the best. And it's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough for Breath of the Wild 2 just because Elden Ring is multi-platform, and you kind of know how a lot of these reviewers treat Nintendo, even when it comes to Zelda and some of this stuff. So it's going to be really tough on that front. But I feel that Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 definitely has an opportunity. And I think that when it comes to actual fans of the games, Zelda past games and everything, I think that this game might be a lot more enjoyable for a lot of people out there, even though Breath of the Wild 1 was so revolutionary when it came out back in 2017. But those are my thoughts on it. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and we'll see you for the next one. Peace.